They are talking about the world, but that world is false. Others say there is no world, they are even worse. There is a world, but it is not that one. Hello to you, once again, wherever you may be on the planet where everything is wrong. It dawned on me this week that these two events were close together and represent a decline in the energy of the West. Until such time comes when we can go again. I stepped into the road on Saturday on the way to the cafe to get some breakfast, and I had a sudden insight into the scene in the Bible of the purple robe and the crown of thorns, and I'll talk a little bit about that later and about Egypt. But first, Gurdjieff. Recently, with recent events, people are acting very strangely. At difficult times, you realize that many people in society are being carried. They do not see what there is to see. Our talks about people who could be interested in the system and able to work involuntarily led us towards evaluation of our friends from an entirely new point of view. In this respect, we all experienced bitter disappointment, even before G had formally requested us to speak of the system to our friends. We had, of course, all tried in one way or another to talk about it, at any rate with those of them whom we met most often. And in most cases our enthusiasm in regard to the ideas of the system met with a very cold reception. They did not understand us. The ideas which seemed to us new and original seemed to our friends to be old and tedious, leading nowhere, and even repellent. This astonished us more than anything else. We were amazed that people with whom we felt an inner intimacy, with whom in former times we had been able to talk about all questions that worried us, and in whom we had found a response, could fail to see what we saw, and above all, that they could see something quite opposite. I have to say that in regards to my own personal experience, it gave me a very strange and even a painful impression. I speak of the absolute impossibility of making people understand us. We are, of course, accustomed to this in ordinary life, in the realm of ordinary questions, and we know that people who are hostile to us at heart, or narrow-minded, or incapable of thought can misunderstand us, twist and distort anything we say, and can ascribe to us thoughts we never had, words which we never uttered, and so on. But now when we saw that all this was being done by those whom we used to regard as our kind of people, with whom we used to spend very much of our time, and who formerly had seemed to understand us better than anyone else, it produced on us a discouraging impression. Such cases constituted the exceptions. Most of our friends were merely indifferent, and all our attempts to infect them with our interest in G-system led to nothing. But sometimes they got a very curious impression of us. I do not remember now who was the first to notice that our friends found we had begun to change for the worse. They found us less interesting than we had been before. They told us we were becoming colourless, as though we were fading. We're losing our former spontaneity, our former responsiveness to everything, that we were becoming machines. We were ceasing to think originally, were ceasing to feel, that we were merely repeating like parrots what we heard from G. G laughed a great deal when we told him about this. "Wait, there is worse to come. Do you understand what this really means? It means that you have stopped lying. At any rate, you don't lie so well. That is, you can no longer lie in so interesting a way as before. He is an interesting man who lies well, but you are already ashamed of lying. You are now able to acknowledge to yourselves sometimes that there is something you do not know or do not understand, and you cannot talk as if you knew all about everything. It means, of course, that you have become less interesting, less original, and less, as they say, responsive. So now you are really able to see what sort of people your friends are, and on their part they are sorry for you, and in their own way they are right. You have already begun to die. It is a long way yet to complete death, but still a certain amount of silliness is going out of you. You can no longer deceive yourself as sincerely as you did before. You have got the taste of the truth. The world is a fraud, and all the teachings of the world are trying to communicate not to the person, the persona, but to communicate to the real self. That is the kind of world we live in. A world of teachings that are not directed to the face that reads them. But I remember reading The White Spider, that the climbers who climbed through the treacherous higher reaches had to sustain falling rocks and freezing rivers flowing down on their face, bashing against their head, sometimes hitting them in the forehead and throwing them off to their death. They had to endure that. They had to cling on like moss at altitude. They had to use everything to climb through that hell and reach the light of the summit. And it is the same. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First is Simon, who is called Peter. His name has changed from the outside to the inside, because the light is in him. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And they twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand, knelt down before him, and mocked him, saying, "Hail the King of the Jews!" Then they spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head repeatedly. After they had mocked him, they removed the robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. It's a powerful image, a powerful scene, but reflecting on it to the side of the powerful river of feelings that comes through it, there are many meanings to this scene. The insight I had was that they put a crown of thorns on his head. The others amongst whom he was born into, they put the thorns on his head, because thorns are upon their head. And who is it that can be born and receive the thorns and then remove the thorns? The Roman Empire covered the land of the Jews and also Egypt. And the Romans made an uneasy arrangement with the Jews, where Herod Antipas was their representative and Pilate was the Roman representative, and they gnawed on each other. Both sides were resentful. Here some Roman soldiers ridicule Jesus. They say, "Hail, King of the Jews," and they get to spit on the Jews who ordinarily they have to have some accommodation with. They cannot share their true feelings. And on the other side, the Jewish crowd, the rabble, they demand the crucifixion of Jesus under the orders of their leaders. It is a way for the Jews to assert their own identity. They say, "We are Jews, we know who we are, and this is not our king. Damn you, Pilate." See, both sides are using Jesus to project their own inner discontent. For the Jews, the days of speaking to the burning bush were more than 1,000 years before that, when Moses had gone to Egypt and returned with his teaching. It was a long time ago, and the Jews had certainly fallen. Like all once glorious people, they blamed everyone else, and they yearned for the glory days that are truly far away. And mostly in that situation, they will yearn and yearn and yearn until the tide has washed them away. You see it everywhere. And Rome itself had fallen from its height and become more of a republic, more of a democratic organization. The original lava from the Seven Hills and the she-wolf and Romulus and Remus and that glory had faded and materialized. So they were also ridiculing the notion of a king with his red cloak. All sides were falling and all sides were complaining. And here was one man in the middle of them who was covered in their projections. And this morning I saw in my own mental vision that I was thinking about various people in the world, and I could see that what a normal me is a person's complaints about the world. Complaining about this person, this and that. That is what a me is. It does not mean that the me doesn't exist. It does exist, but it sees its own inner feelings, its own inner movement, its own inner identity. It sees it only outside, hung on the faces and actions of people there, because it cannot experience itself directly. It does not remember itself. To remember yourself means that the me experiences it directly, and it does not go through the projection into the outside world. Now listen to this quote from Fragments of an Unknown Teaching, and I read this verbatim. It often happens that the sex center unites with a negative part of the emotional center, or with the negative part of the instinctive center. I say that for people who have imagined these last 70 years or so that cutting the negative emotions has something to do with Gurdjieff's teaching, but it is really not that simple at all. There is a negative part of the emotional center, and if we really consider, when you go to school, you're taught how to use your body, how to dig, how to play football, how to do this, how to do that. You're taught how to think, but not so with emotions. And that is a big problem. Emotions are, for human beings, treated almost as if they don't exist, or we would wish them not to exist because they are so unpredictable. But in fact, they are everything. Projecting upon each other, we are a fragmented people, very much like a nebula, the birthplace of stars. From that land, it was a straightforward journey to Egypt along the coastal trading routes that is called the Via Maris. It seems that Jesus was taken out of the land of the Jews and into Egypt, where he received some kind of transmission and then returned a few years later. I also note that the colour of Jesus' robe, whether it was purple or red or another colour, shows the lack of competence that people today have in such matters. They do not comprehend colours as carrying the forces, red being active, blue being passive. And as Gurdjieff says, a further complication is that as it was in the beginning, so it shall be in the end. And that an element of the universe may carry the opposite current of its natural position under some circumstances. One has to be quite intelligent to put all these pieces together from the principles. I'm just reading this from an Egyptian travel website. Ancient Egyptian religion was not a separate aspect of life, but the very core of Egyptian civilization. Centered on the worship of a vast pantheon of gods and the pursuit of Ma'at, the divine order of truth, balance and justice, it influenced every element of society from governance to daily routines. Egyptians saw nature as animated by divine forces and believed the pharaoh acted as the earthly mediator between humans and gods. At the heart of this belief system was Heka, or magic, a divine power believed to sustain the universe and bridge the mortal and divine realms. In ancient images, the crown had fewer thorns. Thank you for listening.